After we set the threshold to 2,000, now here we have a bunch of events that have happened here on a number of different data channels. So right now it's been relatively quiet at 6,000. So we're going to go up to 6,500. And if we start seeing some events, we'll stop. I would say that was it.
Should I stop now?
Yeah, I think so.
Almost 50 minutes into the excellent Netflix documentary, I do highly recommend it. We see critical footage of the carbon hull being tested under Titanic depth pressures, and Stockton and his crew realizing just how weak it was. Seeing it happen, hearing it happen, at least that's what the test showed, and that's what they were supposed to realize.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. Have you guys watched this really good documentary? It's really a quality production. Let's listen to another clip.
You know, if I have a ski made of carbon or composite material and I'm putting pressure on the ski and you can hear it creaking and cracking, you don't actually know when it's going to snap.
But if you put more pressure on it and you hear more creaking and cracking and you put more pressure on it and the creaking and cracking intensifies, a reasonably intelligent person will probably assume, well, this thing might be about to break. One of my favorite commentators in the documentary is Tell It Like It Is Rob McCullum, a deep sea exploration expert from New Zealand. McCullum basically passes some of the more complicated aspects of the design and technology into accessible analogies and explanations, like this one.
It's a regular technical.
The monitoring system for the hull was something that was dreamt up by OceanGate in order to try and give some comfort to people who are asking too many questions.
Before we get to the rest of this analysis, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Bear in mind I've got a playlist of 80 plus videos on Titan. I was the only true crime creator who covered this incident in real time. So if you want to review that real-time coverage, have a look at the playlist. I'll post it in the description. If you're finding this analysis worthwhile, please hit the thanks button and let's get started.
Oh, look at that. Oh, there's sort of an inflow and explode. Wow. Okay. So the good news is we started to see evidence of failure before it happened. All tests are good tests.
So do you see what he's doing? Stockton somehow turns this whole thing, these failures, into successes, saying, wow, we could actually predict that the failure is going to happen, and that validates the testing equipment rather than the actual lesson that's being learned, which is that the material itself is failing catastrophically. So there's a sense that the pin doesn't seem to drop. Instead, there's an awkward silence interspersed with not very funny jokes about the shattered vessel appearing to resemble a Jackson Pollock. And do I need to be explicit about it? Do you know what is shattering here? The carbon fiber. And you see a weird kind of denial setting in. It's a kind of, let's pretend we didn't see that, let's pretend we don't know that, and let's just keep going. Interestingly, who do you notice who is right there in the background quietly observing while these tests are going on? And in the audio, you actually hear a woman going, oh, it's Wendy Rush. I'm not sure if she's the one who says, oh, but she's certainly there in the room. She's Stockton's wife, Director of Communications at OceanGate. Remember her reaction to hearing the implosion on June 18th at the surface. Her reaction was to do what they'd been doing all along, smile dumbly in the face of reality. There's even Tony Nissen, OceanGate's Director of Engineering, chuckling now on camera in this documentary about Stockton saying to him, now it's your problem. That in itself is so troubling. The amusement in hindsight, just completely missing the seriousness of the situation even while reviewing the disaster.
Stockton turned to me and said, well, now it's your problem.
And I think the denial is understandable if you understand just how close Stockton felt he was to his own greatness. And perhaps that's how the people around him felt as well. that Stockton was very close to his own greatness. After all, he had reached the depth of the Titanic in a carbon fiber vessel, hadn't he? So why couldn't he do it again? The test showed why, but that meant after all the work, all the money spent, all the tickets sold, pre-sold, all the showboating, they were going to have to start all over again. Well, he was 61. He simply couldn't afford to do that. He simply wasn't going to take this message from the ether. No. He simply was going to ignore it.
I would say that was it.
Should I stop now?
Yeah, I think so.
So you're listening to this thing screaming, you're listening to it stressing and telling you that it's under immense pressure.
And so remember, when you go down in the submersible, it's making those same noises. Noises that are saying, I'm under immense pressure, I'm starting to fail. And so what do? Ignore those noises as they get worse, continue ignoring them. I covered this case in real time, and I suspected over the 4 days where time was supposedly running out that the clock had stopped all along. From the history of the vessel, from Lockridge's documented protests and lawsuit, it seemed likely even at the time that an inevitable failure with a material unsuited to what they were doing all along had failed not a little but a lot. Not that some onboard system had simply glitched, but that they were sitting in the dark on the seabed waiting to be rescued, but that it was all over. The misery of the Titan incident was that we know what was known at the time, and that the Titan was heard imploding, and they knew, and they let the search go on while being, it seems, very discreet about this. Remember, James Cameron and other outsiders, they seem to be very clear that the search was a fool's errand, and it was a very expensive search as well. But OceanGate, following the same tiresome agenda they'd been following all along, defaulted to persisting regardless while keeping everyone else in the dark. In terms of the weaknesses of the vessel, we do know what was the issue. The carbon fiber was the critical flaw. It was quite simply the wrong material to use in a pressure vessel, and he knew that as well. The denial, including from people watching this and covering it, that let's not talk about the carbon fiber. No, it's not the carbon fiber. It's not the obvious thing. That was also incredible to behold as someone who is putting together these episodes. And it was because of years of know-it-all arrogance and entitlement that he couldn't admit to all the minions below him that they were right and he was wrong, that he had been wrong all along. And because that wasn't how the fairy tale was supposed to work.
But once you start down the path of doing it entirely yourself, when you realize you've taken the wrong turn right back at the beginning, particularly for Stockton, then you have to admit that you were wrong. That's a big pill to swallow.
And that's how the nightmare happened. Pursuing a fairy tale, ignoring reality, and then reality starts to build up. The pressure building up until boom. Make no mistake, the actual pressure on this vessel is an analogy for the pressure that Stockton himself faced to prove himself, and he knew that this pressure was increasing. But that's the reality. You listen to it and adapt and live, or ignore it at your peril, deny and die. Are there any realities, pressures that you are ignoring that you need to pay attention to? That there are certain sounds and signals that have started to become audible and that perhaps you need to pay attention to. That is the lesson we need to learn from this disaster. If we learn a lesson, a tragedy isn't quite as tragic as it is. If we don't, like Stockton didn't, then it really is a total catastrophe. I'm not going to take it further than that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.